In an earlier video, I mentioned a very easy way to remember monopolistically competitive markets characteristics is just think about perfectly competitive markets and think of a realistic version of perfectly competitive markets. Now, perfectly competitive markets have many small buyers and sellers. Now, is this realistic? Yes. So monopolistically competitive markets will also have many small buyers and sellers. Secondly, perfectly competitive markets have no barriers to entry, but this is quite unrealistic because every single market will have some sort of barrier to entry. So the most realistic version of that is low barriers to entry, which is exactly what monopolistically competitive markets has. So I hope you can understand what I mean for it's a realistic version of perfectly competitive markets. Just to end it off, for example, in perfectly competitive markets, we have homogeneous goods, but that's also not very realistic if you think about everyday markets. So for monopolistically competitive markets, it would be differentiated goods. So just to recap, the three characteristics of monopolistically competitive markets: many small buyers and sellers, low barriers to entry/exit, and differentiated goods. Now, over the last few years, I've done a lot of work with A-level economics students, and I find it very rare for a student to know an example of monopolistically competitive markets. But knowing specific examples of these market structures, and specifically monopolistically competitive markets, can almost help you visualize it in your head. And then for me, it really helped me derive the characteristics from remembering the examples. So a really good example of monopolistically competitive markets would be restaurants, hairdressers. Good bit of application to back that up is in 2024, the UK had 88,000 restaurants. Now, building on the example, all restaurants will sell the same thing, so it'll all be some sort of combination of food and drink. But the higher end luxury restaurants will try to differentiate with things such as pleasant dining experience, unique menus, etc. Moving on, just like perfectly competitive markets, monopolistically competitive markets will have two equilibriums. So of course they'll have their short run and their long run. Now let's start with monopolistically competitive markets short run equilibrium and what it looks like. Thankfully, there's nothing new to learn here. All it is a simple monopoly diagram as we've learned previously. But remember, the main thing with all these equilibriums is the types of profits being made in them. So, what profits can monopolistically competitive markets make in the short run? Just like perfectly competitive markets, they can make supernormal profits in the short run. How do monopolistically competitive markets move from the short run to the long run? In the short run, monopolistically competitive markets diagram is exactly the same as a monopoly diagram. This will mean they make a box of supernormal profit, of course, from where MC equals MR going up, and this will give us now our box of supernormal profit in blue. Now, since in the short run, in monopolistically competitive markets, there is that box of supernormal profit, this will incentivize new firms outside the market to enter. Why? As they want to experience some of those supernormal profits, they want to gain some supernormal profit. And if you think back to the characteristics of monopolistically competitive markets and the barriers to entry, they have low barriers to entry, meaning that it is fairly easy for a new firm to enter the market. Now, when new firms enter the market, this increases competition in the market. This means these new firms will steal incumbent firms' consumers away, meaning the demand for incumbent firms decreases, so the demand curve and MR curve shift in for these incumbent firms. So that will look like this. So your D equals AR curve shifts to the purple, D1 equals AR1, and your MR curve shifts to the purple MR1 curve. This is due to new entrants stealing consumers away from incumbent firms. Your demand curve and your MR curve will continue to shift in until there are no longer any supernormal profits left in the market. Why? Since even if we look at these purple curves which have been shifted in, if we profit maximize, so at this point here, go up to our AR curve, and then go back to our AC curve, there is still a box, albeit it is a bit smaller, there is still a box of supernormal profit. This means for new entrants wanting to join the market, there is still some incentive for new firms to join the market. Therefore, the shift in of our demand and our MR curve will stop when there is no longer any supernormal profits in the market, i.e. when there's no longer any incentive for new firms to join the market. The two curves which have to intersect for there no longer to be any supernormal profit left or you can call it normal profit, is your demand curve and your AC curve. So our demand curve would look like this. So demand curve, all it needs to do is intersect our AC curve, just like that. So D equals AR. Now MR, same rule applies, twice as deep, so it would look like this. MR. And now that is our completed long run equilibrium in monopolistically competitive markets. Let's prove this with a profit maximization point. So where MC equals MR, we go up from there, which would give us our price at where we profit maximize, the price the firm charges, which is Pmax. Now let's try find our box of supernormal profit. What do we do from there? We go to our AC curve, but our average costs are exactly the same as our price. Therefore, what does that mean? Your prices are the same as your costs, meaning you are only making normal profit, you are making no supernormal profit. In summary, our long run equilibrium is reached when D equals AR intersects our AC curve, as at this point there are only normal profits to be made in the market, therefore no longer any incentive for new firms to join the market. Let's put everything I just said into some simplified notes. So with moving between the short run and the long run, the first step is always how supernormal profit affects new firms. So in this scenario, supernormal profit will incentivize new firms to join the market. And with monopolistically competitive markets having low barriers to entry, this makes it fairly easy for new firms to join the market. And like we said, when there's more firms in the market, there is more competition. And with more competition, this means these new firms will steal away consumers from the incumbent firm, therefore decreasing the incumbent firm's demand, shifting in the incumbent firm's D equals AR and MR curve. And these will continue to shift in until there is only normal profit to be made, so when there's no more supernormal profit. And this equals when our demand curve touches our average cost curve, like I said, meaning only normal profits can be made. Why does this stop the shift in of the demand curve? As when there's only normal profits in the market, it deters potential suppliers entering the market as they no longer have any incentive to enter. This means this firm has now reached its long run equilibrium, and what two curves have to intersect for a monopolistically competitive market to reach its long run equilibrium? This is when our demand curve or our AR curve intersects our AC curve, and yet again, because at this point there is only normal profits being made.